So we're told that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, commonly referred to as North Korea, is dangerous, irrational, brainwashed, and threatening. Today, September 1st, marks the beginning of the official enforcement of the U.S. travel ban on the DPRK, supposedly in response to the death of Otto Warmbier. Despite this, myself and others from Anti-Coalition wanted to see the country for ourselves before the ban took effect. But let's back up really far, because Korean society is ancient and indigenous to the Korean Peninsula. So there's the Korean Peninsula, there's Japan on the right, China to the left, Russia to the north. So let's outline some historical context. So today when Koreans speak of the future reunification of the North and South, it's direct reference to the original unification by King Wanggeon, who unified 3 feudal kingdoms to make one Koryo in 936 AD. His home, the ancient city of Kaesong, still has entire blocks of houses filled with his direct descendants. In fact, it's common knowledge in Korea that anyone who has large ears and an upturn in the corner of their eyes can trace their lineage to King Wanggeon. So while still an aristocratic feudal king, northern Buddhism flourished and took root during his reign. Just like the Buddhism in a simplified sense focuses on social justice and reduction of suffering, as opposed to the personal salvation of Southern Buddhism. This is a photo that I took actually at a Buddhist temple. We'll get back to all that later. So it was a feudal society. So it was constantly under attack from neighboring warlords. The Korean Peninsula is also important strategically for larger powers. Historical text has been referred to as a dagger, both towards China and both towards Japan. So in 1592, actually, a Buddhist monk named Sosan organized other monks to resist the Japanese invaders, who were one of the largest groups invading them. And even though Buddhist monks are not allowed to kill anyone, he told his monks that if we kill even one Japanese invader, we'll save thousands of lives. So that was Sosan. So all these attacks culminated in 1910 with the beginning of the official Japanese colonial occupation. So there's going to be some graphic content in this presentation. These things are kind of hard to see, but just a heads up, next few slides are going to be a little graphic. So the occupation was extremely brutal. Korean language and culture were outlawed. Any resistance was met with jail, torture, and execution. Koreans were cast into extreme poverty and servitude. It's worth noting during this time that the U.S. was colonizing the Philippines, and they had an agreement with Japan where they let us colonize the Philippines, we let them colonize Korea. So the widespread kidnapping and rape of Korean women by Japanese soldiers was eventually institutionalized with the notorious comfort women operations. Hundreds of thousands of women, many barely teenagers, were trafficked all across Asia to comfort stations. This is actually a screenshot from a video that semi-recently surfaced about actually. So during this time, Kim Il-sung was born in 1912. He was born into peasantry in Myeongsan, Korea, a small mountain town towards the northwest. So his mother was Kang Pan-suk, and his father was Kim Hyung-jik, an anti-Japanese organizer. Kim Hyung-jik was jailed soon after Kim Il-sung's birth for his activities. His mom, Kang Pan-suk, at great risk to herself, brought Kim Il-sung to visit his father in prison when he was only 7. His father had been badly beaten by Japanese guards, who were often infuriated by their inability to get information from the captives. Kim Il-sung writes in his autobiography, "Father's unyielding spirit, even in prison, etched indelible marks in me. Father's wounds taught me about the Japanese imperialists far more than any number of political scientists or historians could have possibly taught me. Father's broken body in prison, that image was always with me, even during moments of heated combat." So, March 1st, 1919, approximately 2 million Koreans held a peaceful, unarmed, nationwide demonstration against the occupation called the March 1st Movement. Japanese police forces ruthlessly suppressed it and opened fire into unarmed crowds. Outrage triggered more villagers to take to the streets in shock, causing additional Japanese troops to be deployed. Civilians were met with batons, bullets, and in one instance, herded into a church and burned. Over 7,500 were killed, almost 16,000 were wounded, and over 46,000 were arrested. Many were taken to the infamous Seo Dae-moon prison in Seoul. This would not be the last peaceful demonstration that was crushed in this way. So Kim Il-sung and many others, having witnessed these events, concluded that peaceful struggle would not suffice. But their first and always fundamental task was educating the youth and people across the countryside. They taught people how to read, science, math, philosophy, Marxism, and eventually military strategy. When Kim Il-sung was active, he would walk for days to convince one farmer to resist the occupation, and that strategy persisted. Their next most important task was to obtain weapons. They had no weapons. They had to kill Japanese soldiers with rocks to take their weapons. Actually, statues of people just holding big rocks in Korea. After years of preparation, Korean People's Army was officially created in 1932. Soon they were joined by activist and guerrilla fighter Kim Jong-suk. She was badass. She was arrested by the Japanese in an undercover attempt to capture food and supplies in 1937, but was soon released and returned to the front lines. It's even reported that she saved Kim Il-sung's life during a gun battle one time. So the struggle for independence resonated throughout Korea, all different layers of society, and garnered significant international attention. International solidarity came, notably from Chinese and Soviet communists. This is a really long and complicated topic aspect of it, so in the interest of time, let's just say that Koreans have always had to be self-reliant. So National Liberation Day in Korea was August 15, 1945, when the Japanese Empire was defeated, partially because of the events of World War II, and the People's Republic of Korea was formed. So the first two laws signed for the People's Republic of Korea were land reform, redistribution of the land to the farmers, and full equality for women. This is a cool propaganda poster. It's an anti-sexual violence propaganda poster. So, however, in the South, as a precondition for surrender of the Japanese, the U.S. demanded that the Japanese keep the troops in South Korea until the U.S. troops could relieve them. From then on, they also employed the same Korean elites who had collaborated with the Japanese occupation. It's also worth noting that the U.S. dropped 2 nukes on Japan, which is completely unnecessary because they were already about to surrender, and this was like a show force. So U.S. imperialists basically picked up where the Japanese imperialists left off. There's all kinds of skirmishes at the border until eventually the UN authorized all-out war. So in 1950 started the Korean War. The U.S. started carpet bombing. In the first year of the Korean War, the most common complaint from pilots was there's nothing left to bomb. The U.S. and allies bombed for 2 more years. They used napalm, among other things. They bombed housing, infrastructure like dams and irrigation, which devastated farming, obviously, and anything, everything. So the next 2 slides are going to be a little graphic. Conservative estimates say that 15% of the population was killed. Others go as high as 20%. That figure does not include those who were wounded, tortured, orphaned, widowed, etc. U.S. and Allied forces carried out mass executions, mass rape, biological warfare, often in the form of releasing insects infected with deadly diseases, including smallpox, cholera, and meningitis. So it's difficult to, really imagine what these things were like, especially for people like us. So before we get done with historical context, I do want to share one experience that I had. This is Jong Song. He was a survivor of the Sinchon massacre. His particular experience was a smaller part of this massacre where it took over an area of the town, and they took all the men into the woods and they shot them, and then they took all the women and put them into one small building, and all the children and put them into another small building. About 400 women and 100 children. And they kept them in there for about a week. It was during the winter. So they had no food or water. So he said he was 5 years old at the time. He said he watched some of his friends die from starvation. Some of them died from cold. And then as the U.S. was retreating, they poured gasoline in through the roofs of these buildings and lit them on fire and left. He said he was in the corner of the room, so he passed out from smoke inhalation, but he lived. He's one of 3 survivors. Yeah, so he would normally be retired, he's very old, but he said he wanted to stay and share his experiences with people. So US and their allies eventually realized they could not win. July 27th, 1953 was Victory Day. So the US was humiliated. It was NATO's, newly formed NATO's first police action and the US Empire's first defeat. Vietnam would be next. So this is General Clark signing the armistice. It's worth noting that this is not a peace treaty. And that's how we got the borders that we have today. So South Korea is still under the military occupation of the US. The president of South Korea cannot move the South Korean army without approval from the US. Today there are over 28,000 troops stationed in South Korea. In fact, Yongsan Garrison, which was the headquarters of the Japanese occupation, is still occupied by US troops in the center of Seoul. The US presence is widely hated. US troops regularly escape investigation or punishment for crimes against civilians, including rape. Ground pollutants at Yongsan are 500 times the normal level. This is not unusual for US military bases. Annual war games explicitly simulate the invasion, decapitation, and occupation of the DPRK. There are even simulations of nuclear first strike attacks by the US. Flyers from bombers are specifically designed to provoke a psychological response, evoking memories of the Korean War. Starting last year, massive demonstrations all across South Korea for months on end, called the Candlelight Movement, led to the impeachment and removal of President Park Geun-hye, who is the daughter of Park Chung-hee, former member of the Imperial Japanese Army, who was tasked with hunting Kim Il-sung and the communist guerrillas, and eventually president himself. Park Geun-hye's extreme right-wing, pro-US administration oversaw the deployment of the US's THAAD missile defense system in the small town of Seongju, despite daily demonstrations and roadblocks from the townspeople for over a year. Defense of South Korea from the DPRK was used as justification for the deployment of THAAD, but like US presence in the Asia Pacific in general, it's also clearly aimed at China. THAAD stands for Terminal High Altitude Aerial Defense and has extensive range, far beyond the DPRK. Some experts say that it would be unable to prevent a missile attack from the DPRK in the first place. But the fight against THAAD in Korea and abroad continues. The newly installed President Moon Jae-in, despite campaigning on opposition to THAAD, has since capitulated to US demands and even increased the number of THAAD launchers. So, very long history, but that's just a brief overview to get us some context. So, our group arrived on August 5th and left on August 12th. So, from Answer Coalition, from the right, we have Derek, he's a professor at Cal University. We've got Anne, she's a high school teacher in San Francisco. And then we've got Ernesto, he's a software engineer from San Francisco. The woman in the center, that was our guide at this facility. And there's me. And there's Professor Chung, he's a South Korean. He helped organize the trip. He's been to DPRK over 100 times, he had a lot of friends, so it really helped us really get immersed. He actually lives in China now because he's banned from returning to South Korea. And then this is Young Hill, he was a DPR Korean. He studied at Cambridge for a while, so he works for a private media company there translating. So he was there, he's an associate at Professor Chung, so he came, helped us translate. So it's good to have two really good speakers who could translate. So, and we traveled everywhere by car, which was awesome, because in addition to having a really packed schedule and having him go around meeting all these different people, we got to see a lot of the countryside up close and talk to our hosts along the way. So we went obviously to all throughout Pyongyang, which holds about a fifth of the population, south of Kaesong and the border, to the Saryuan, western farming town, Sincheon, another western farming town, and Pyongyang, which was awesome. One of the biggest things South Koreans cite when they say they want reunification is they want to go camping. So my first impression was, man, everyone is just, outside, hanging out. Everyone's really relaxed. Everyone seems really happy, very peaceful. Everyone rides their bike. It's one of the good preventive healthcare things. So a lot of people post up. You see them post up on the side of the road, hanging out with their friends, having a picnic. Yeah, really nice. People on cell phones everywhere. It's about 4.5 million cell phones in DPRK. and kids everywhere unsupervised. It's really adorable. Kids have total free agency, and in part because there's almost no social crime in the DPRK. Care for the youth has always been a top priority. Historian Bruce Cummings wrote in 2003, quote, "An internal CIA study almost grudgingly acknowledged various achievements of this regime. Compassionate care for children in general and war orphans in particular, radical change in the position of women, genuine free housing, free health care, and preventative medicine, infant mortality rates comparable to the most advanced countries." The World Health Organization has called the DPRK a model for the developing world. Despite severe historical underdevelopment and hardships endured during the 90s as a result of the collapse of the Soviet Union, drought, extreme sanctions, DPRK persevered and is now prospering. Last year, the UN verified the DPRK was 100% food self-sufficient. So this is a daycare we visited as attached to a factory. This is a factory. So DPRKians are often portrayed as hating the American public, but got no fear or hatred from these kids. They're really cute. I'm obviously a foreigner. No fear. This nice farming family hosted us for lunch at their home in San Juan, a small co-op farm town. They were actually worried about us. They asked us about police brutality and racism and how true all the reports were. They were really worried about us. DPRKians are highly educated and they follow world events closely. They also understand the difference between the U.S. population and the U.S. government. So back to the factory. This is also part of the factory. Education has always been a top priority. It's a classroom attached to a factory. Free social services made available at the workplace, particularly classes, a policy that has existed since before the Korean War. All education is free in Korea. There are universities in every major town, and entry is based solely on aptitude. You're able to visit the newly renovated Kim Il-sung University in Pyongyang and interview several teachers and students. Kim Il-sung University was actually partially destroyed during the Korean War, but always prioritizing education. They actually just relocated into the mountains until they could return to Pyongyang. When I asked what educational advice I could offer, one professor said, education should always be a dialogue between the teacher and the student, not a one-way lecture. So please ask me questions at the end of the talk. Let's go back to this collage, actually. So this building in the top left, this is in the center of that square where they do all the military parades. This is actually called the Grand People's Study House. And in part, it's a giant library with over 35 million books, over half of which are in foreign languages, including Chinese, Russian, English, French, Spanish, etc. People from around the world can send books. If you want to send a book there, you totally can. They have Harry Potter, Mark Twain. They have a little conveyor belt to school. The worker there, she asked us what kind of books we want, and we told her, and it just comes out of this little conveyor belt. I'm not sure how that works. And the reason they call it the Grand People's Study House and not a library is because in addition to having millions of books, they also offer free classes. So this is, I believe, an English class and a Chinese class. Totally free. Let's have the music listening room. Here's Anne listening to some Madonna. So let's go back to this picture too. So this is actually the children's palace. So this inscription something to the effect that children are the future. It's newly renovated. There's a lot of new construction in the DPRK. Despite the sanctions, DPRK currently has a GDP growth of about 9%. Most capitalist countries are happy with about 3% growth. The US has barely 1%. Among other things, investment in a nuclear deterrent has allowed for a smaller military budget, and money is now being reinvested to improve the standard of living. So the Children's Palace is basically an after-school program for gifted kids, which exists in every major town. This particular one in Pyongyang serves over 5,000 kids a day, teach music, dance, art, sports, and advanced academics. These kids are really awesome. It's worth pointing out that the Workers' Party of Korea symbol looks like a scary thing, right? But so the hammer represents the workers, Slocum represents the farmers, and the paintbrush represents creatives and academics. So DPRK has many skilled performers and artists employed privately or by the state. and Korean ceramics have been particularly prized around the world for centuries. Derek's laughing because we asked how much his base was, and they said $300,000, and he's like, not in on it. No cars arrested us. So instead of advertisements, public spaces are decorated with art. Another cool one mural. I also love these vehicles that make these kind of stuff. Cool. So let's talk about the military. There's no separation between the military and the people. Military service is completely voluntary. Since there's almost no social crime, there's no police force like we're used to. Just military, traffic officers, and the occasional facility guard. We actually got pulled over one time by one of these traffic guards because we were rushing to some appointment and our driver was driving a little fast. And one of our hosts got out of the car and went up to the traffic officer. The traffic officer was like, "Hey, slow down." Later. So soldiers are not a force of authority, but rather public servants. They're often actually referred to as soldier workers or soldier farmers since they're deployed to assist the existing labor force. So we were actually there during a time when there's a lot of help needed on the farms. So like everyone in the community, including soldiers, comes to the farms to help people with the farm work. So also I wanted to share a brief story. So there are obviously military checkpoints, although you don't really see a high level of militarization. You see like a 17-year-old with an AK every few miles when you're by the border. And we got stopped at one of these, and I knew a little bit of Korean, so I heard him say this myself. To our driver, he says, "안녕 하세요, 동시," which basically means respectfully older comrade, hello, like addressing him as a superior, basically. And we were just talking about flooding. Yeah, this is the military that's deployed. This is from 2012. Military is deployed to help with things like that. And whenever a crisis occurs, millions of people volunteer for the services, and veterans come out of retirement. So we were actually there when this happened, and it's very peaceful. We watched it on the news, the restaurant there, and millions of people signed up for the military that day. So soldiers are not scared. Nor did I see any fearful body language in locals when soldiers were present. On the contrary, I did see children playing in guard towers, for example. I did see, we were at a store one time, and this soldier was trying to mess with the air conditioning, and he like knocked over this like flower display that was on top of it. He's like trying to fix it, and he couldn't. And this shopkeeper woman came up, and she was like trying to fix it, and she couldn't. And she's yelling at him, and she's like hitting him and stuff like that. No fear. So let's talk about these claims of widespread human rights abuses. So I won't take the time to go through them all, but most are either clearly clickbait, or have been debunked, or recanted. Part of this is due to there being almost no social safety net in South Korea, a fact which is often blamed for the extremely high suicide rate, second in the world by a small margin. Work is hard to find and low paying, especially for defectors, but journalists and other media offer lucrative contracts for defector stories. DPRK does, of course, have prisons. It's not a utopia, but there are clearly economically and politically motivated campaigns to demonize the country. Especially considering the double standard. The U.S. incarcerates more people per capita than any other nation by far, mostly for crimes of poverty or drug use. There's a clear racial bias, and among other abuses, the U.S. still uses solitary confinement, despite it being declared inhumane by most of the world. The U.S. doesn't need to hide their human rights abuses, they flaunt them. Not to mention the actions of close U.S. allies. This is white phosphorus. So, regardless, my goal of this presentation is to share my personal experience. And I just don't see it. The whole time I was in the DPRK, I was overwhelmed by the compassion of everyone around me. People are genuinely welcoming, and they are dedicated to their community like family. And in the face of everything, remarkably at peace. So, another story, on the last night before we left, we were having dinner with our hosts, and they're asking us, what we thought about our trip. Anne was talking about how when she was coming here, all of her friends and her family, you can't go there, it's a dangerous place, and we're not going to bail you out, you get in trouble, and like, how are you doing this? And she said after she came, she she sees that there's nothing to fear and it's a totally different world. And this waitress overheard us talking and was like in tears and came over and wanted to give Anne a hug. I didn't really get a great picture of it, but. So I do want to talk about the current military tensions first. So as I stated earlier, a peace treaty was never signed, only an armistice. The U.S. and DPRK are still officially at war. The U.S. paints the DPRK as a rogue state, even though it's never invaded another country. Even the U.S. claims only that it invaded South Korea, which is inaccurate. The U.S. has launched dozens of invasions on every continent, regularly defies international law in doing so, using unilateral strikes, banned weaponry, torture, attacking civilians, hospitals, etc. The U.S. also paints the DPRK as irrational. DPRK is a small nation. Their military budget is smaller than the budget of the NYPD. Any first strike by the DPRK would ultimately be suicide. However, they have been able to develop a significant deterrent in the face of very real threats, enough so far to prevent the invasion of their country. DPRK has continuously sought a peace agreement and an end to the war games. They are not games to Koreans. They are an existential threat, a threat to repeat the Korean War, which they vividly remember. The DPRK has continuously offered to halt weapons programs in return for negotiations. During the Clinton administration, the nuclear program actually was halted as a result of direct negotiations. Then Bush declared North Korea as part of the axis of evil with Iran and Iraq, and subsequently invaded and destroyed Iraq. DPRK, quite rationally, restarted their nuclear program. Since then, negotiations have been off the table for the U.S. The UK then convinced Libya to give up its weapons program, right before completely destroying Libya. This led to an additional acceleration of the DPRK nuclear program. This pattern has repeated for decades. Every time the U.S. escalates its threats, performs a war game, DPRK tests weapons, hoping to prevent their own destruction and bring the U.S. to the negotiating table. The simple solution is for the U.S. to negotiate directly with the DPRK and finally sign a peace treaty. But while most of the U.S. establishment understands these facts, they're also willing to risk a catastrophic war to push the envelope of U.S. dominance in the region and satisfy the already bloated military-industrial complex. We must be there to combat the warmongering and the demonization. Korean people have struggled heroically, but our position inside the belly of the beast, inside the heart of imperialism, gives us the great power and responsibility to stop the madness. Thank you.